you can provide guidance on that when we talk about differentiators between you and the other people that are like, oh yeah, we got firewalls, we got switches, we
They
got
don't care about that.
Yeah, right. But you tell them, what I'd really like to do is help you with your.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Cyber Confidential. I'm your host, Mike. We're starting a new special mini-series called The Riches in the Niches. Everyone's probably been telling you that you need to niche down and find a vertical that works for you. So you know the why, but I want to break down the how. How to actually find a niche that works for you and what it means to be in that vertical. How do you speak the language? What are the watering holes? Where do those prospects go? How do they talk about their problems? Who's influencing them? What products they use? And then the most important thing is like what their problems are, because the better we know their problems, the better we are at solving them. And this is our first episode in this Riches in the Niches mini-series. And I got our guest, Mike Fielstra from Tech Pro Marketing. Welcome to the show, Mike.
The very first thing, especially when it comes to manufacturing, and I would say any of these, regardless of which of the industries or vertical or niches, however you want to refer to it, that you're trying to get into, is to first understand that client, right? What are their challenges? And what we usually recommend to them is doing a client interview. If you've already got somebody that you formed a good relationship with and you represent them well and you want more of those clients, you're following the pumpkin plan, you like them, you've got good efficiency with them, your techs are closing the tickets, you've got good efficiency, you're making good margin, and the most important, the joy factor, you enjoy working with them, so you want more of them. then you really have to find some of those clients that you can do a client interview with. We use, and I can share the link with you, but we use what's known as a lean strategy canvas or a lean startup methodology in order to interview the clients and learn more about their business. What are their challenges? What are their unique values, that they value? What are some of the unique, tool sets that they're using? All those things, you want to learn that so that you can talk their lingo. And I'll give some of those components, right, for the manufacturing industry. I was in that for about 10 years selling machine tools, specifically water jets. So had a lot of experience in the aerospace manufacturing industries, as well as fabricators and other sheet goods and all the other various branches in that incredible mind map I saw you made. When you're talking to them and you want to learn more about them, I think first to talk to them about what type of manufacturer they are, is going to really classify them to what they're doing. If it is your basic fab shop, welding shop, structural steel or any of those kind of things, totally different set of parameters and goals and personalities than a machine shop or folks that are making chips, and you can ask them that question too, just, what are you? Aerospace, composites, totally different. I think the real way to get your foot in the door with any of them, though, is what's coming down the pipeline and what we talked to Miller Group about, with NIST and the CMMC, certifications and that guidance that they're really looking for as far as walking them through. And it's consultative work. It's compliance work. If you have experience with HIPAA, CMMC is essentially just a modification of a lot of the HIPAA things. Eventually, every industry is going to have some type of NIST standard that they have to perform to. But when you begin that conversation with them, if we want to get into language first, loosen up your vernacular, be comfortable with some of the blue collar terminology, take off your tie if you wear one. A lot of those things.
Get your G-Shock watch, throw a couple tactical paracord bracelets on.
Exactly. Make sure that you got a Leatherman on your belt, maybe.
I know people might listen to this and think we're joking, but this is part like the audience wants to see themselves in you. That's how they'll relate. You got to relate to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you bring them your Carhartt shirt? May I compliment you? It is one of the best shirts I've ever worn. I'm still fighting for ownership. I was going to wear it today, but I got the MSP sites on.
That's good. That's good.
But and I'm fighting for ownership because my wife tried it on and really likes it too. So
okay, I'll send you another one. Actually, I have Cyber Confidential Carhartt shirts too. I'll send you one of those.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ooh,
podcast guest special. Oh, there's only maybe 20 in the world right now, and there's like 200 of these iceberg shirts. So
get hats, shirts. I think anything that can kind of align you to them, when you're showing up, like gifts are always good for that industry as well. They're going to be welcome to them. First and foremost, if you're working with any, find out some of the softwares that are specific. SolidWorks is probably the biggest one out there. Probably one of the big challenges they're having is actually creating the G code, whatever they're using. I go way back to like Gibbs Cam and some of the other master cams. I don't know
Master Cam, totally.
Any of those for doing the cam work. How are they networking the machines? Are they still carrying out flash drives to all of them? Have they actually worked on their file management system? Talk to them about how they're working with that. Of course, we want everybody in Microsoft and SharePoint and those things, but they may have some resistance. I can tell you any machine tool that gets hooked up to a network and receives any type of auto updates usually throws it into a whole fritz. So that's usually why they keep them off the network.
Which would be a big problem.
Yeah. Cautionary tale, tell them that you're going to network every machine in their shop so that they can all talk to each other and get constant updates, and they're going to show you the door. You're not networking any of my machines. Do you know what happened the last time I tried to network my machines and Windows updates and this security framework patch, whatever, threw off everything. Some of the water jets I used to sell ran on XP,
totally. And that's not going to be a surprise. That's not going to be a surprise, and it's not going to be a rarity because a lot of those machines were manufacturing assets purchased as machines, not as computers. And the manufacturer, it's not just that your client thinks of them as machines.
Right.
The manufacturer treated them as machines, not as computers, when they made them 15 years ago.
Yeah. Now, fortunately, there probably aren't that many water jets out there because they eat themselves alive. It's the only machine tool that consumes itself through operation and breaks constantly so that you have to buy a new one, but that's my knock against the water jet industry. I'll try to keep that there. More than anything, I think speaking their lingo and knowing them, you're going to learn that from an existing client. If you're trying to penetrate that market and you've never, engaged with any of them, that's where that next part would go into is where do they gather? Right? Where do I find them? Right? Exactly. First and foremost, I always recommend, and I've got the link, we can maybe share these as well, would be just to look up connecting with your local MEP through NIST. The MEP is your manufacturing excellence partnership. They have a individual center in every state. It's typically really close to wherever your capital is. But I'll pop it into, I think there's a chat here, is there not? So that's the local MEP centers. You find one locally. For me in the state of Washington, we worked with Impact Washington, amazing group. They had other organizations like the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance, great one to join and get a part of if there are any aerospace alliances in your area. Just if there are trades groups that you can go and join, nothing better than a good lunch and learn, right? Get everybody to get on Jimmy John's to the app. They can order all of their sandwiches and have them all delivered together. You don't have to take orders, what have you. Feed them. They will come. See if you can host a lunch and learn and just give some high level, overview of what's going on with NIST. And if they aren't aware, they should be, aware that it's coming down the pipe, and it looks like it's actually going to have some teeth with this next revision. It's not going to be.
Do you think that would draw people in? I would feel like something more day to day, like their Mastercam stuff, or some SolidWorks tips. I think that would draw at least more bodies because more people will have that friction.
That's true. Anything you can do, but you're going to need some expertise there. You're going to have to offer third-party vendor management and tell them that you're willing to sit on the phone for 2 hours with SolidWorks to resolve some of those issues. And depends on the depth of your vendor management offering. I think is going to be a big part of it too. But I really think anybody that's working within that that aerospace field, or anybody even making chips, or anybody that's supplying to the bigger OEMs, that is going to fall under NIST. That's the big one that's moving down the pipe, because they're coming up with an extra revision. It's actually going to have some teeth. It's not going to be like your OSHA folder that you can just hang on the wall and say
Hmm.
that you did it. With the 172 was a lot of self-attestation. Now it's by 2026, I think it's going to start. They're going to start auditing people, right? You need to get ahead of it at this point. And I'll say the other reason I say to get involved with the MEP and your local MEP, as well as these organizations, is that the federal government is funding almost half of the compliance training courses for these. Impact Washington, in general, funded about 70% of the cost of our compliance work with a lot of the companies that we were working with. They have federal funding to provide to you, whether it's working on Kaizen or lean manufacturing, of some of your ISO certifications, any of those things. They can help you pay for, that compliance work that you're doing with those individual clients. And if you tell a shop you've got some free money and some free training for them, and that all they got to do is show up, to get it. Now you do have to go through an application process with the local MEP in a lot of cases to get your hands on, and they award it, to them. But a lot of them too are for shops that are 20 or less people. So you're not dealing with huge organizations. It's usually a pretty decent size organization for some of the funding dollars that are there as well. Um, but as far as Mastercam and SolidWorks, or any of the cams that are out there for code processing and some of those things, or the networking of the machines, make sure that you've got, you're squared away and you know what you're talking about, and you've done that kind of work before, because I think they'll poke holes in it pretty quickly if you don't have expertise in those types of softwares. So,
Yeah,
um,
we can, I think, riff us off some of those line of business applications that come to mind. But I'll move this caption to later, because
mhm,
that's a big one for me. I just had an MSP message me today talking about Clio, which for legal firms is like their
yeah,
practice management software. The Clio website says the
absolutely,
number one, whether it is or not, whatever. But
probably.
te- so for a legal firm, that's what they think about.
Hmm.
For manufacturing companies, like, manufacturing is an entire industry. So for some of the deeper niches that
Yeah.
tell us some of those line of business applications and sort of like what niches those map to.
Cool.
And Mike number 2 on this call did refer to the mind map that we're creating. Like, we're literally visualizing all these different niches and like the application and stuff. So we're putting that together as the collation of all these ideas. But just rifle off some of the line of business applications. I'm going to take notes. We'll put in the show notes, but so the
Sure.
audience can hear from you because you used to work there.
Basic level AutoCAD. I think AutoCAD, Autodesk, whatever they're going by these days, but AutoCAD is probably the biggest. SolidWorks, Mastercam. I'll also go. There's a lot of them that are going into 3D printing now. So do some research into your 3D printing. There are a lot of different slicing programs to, cut up the individual models and files. But if you've got some experience in 3D printing, um, they might see that as a device they want you to manage, like some of their other printers, and want to have some expertise there. And it is growing really fast.
And
If
that's the
I,
game
if
you're
I,
buying into here. Like, this is, don't take that as a burden. This is when someone would say, what differentiates you? This is what differentiates you. You say, not only do I do the computers, I also have expertise with your 3D printers. And
right,
whatever PDM, I don't even remember what PDM stood for SolidWorks. I'm a mechanical engineer, fortunately, so I've lived this life before too. But
right,
whatever the parts and data management software, can't remember what it stands for SolidWorks, you got to manage that, or at
mhm,
least you have to be the conduit to SolidWorks to help manage it. Because
mhm.
at some point, the client's going to look to you and say, "This is a computer problem. I have a tech problem. I need tech support."
And I would even refer to it as a CAD or CAM. Either it's some type of CAD or it's some type of CAM. Be
Spell
familiar with
those
the
acronyms
files.
out for the listeners that don't have a mechanical
Uh,
engineering background.
Computer aided drafting, right, is the big one, right? You're not doing it on paper anymore. And then CAM is that's creating the code that actually feeds into the machine, that up, down, left, right, plunge, all of the other things for the tools that they might be using is the CAM portion, where it takes the movement in order to create that model that's there.
Right.
And the
That's where the
file,
G code comes in.
yeah,
G code is like the raw XYZ coordinates from this position to this position with the bit and back and then down. That's what G code is.
yeah. G code is that language that you're feeding in, and most things still are reading off of G code. You're going to have to know DXF, drawing exchange file. DXFs are the big ones, and there's some other ones, but the DXF is probably the big one for a lot of the beam cutting that's out there: laser, plasma, water jet. Um,
Mhm.
with all of the 3D printing files and the 3D printing, styles and types. Now we've got, not only are we doing PLA and all the material types, the different types of materials that they can print in, step your language up in those and the types that they print. And now we've got the the newest version, which is the, like, I'm trying to think of the right terminology. See, I'm still behind the curve on that one because
Mhm,
I'm still
mhm.
printing in PLA, but the
SLA and
laser,
SLS.
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's also the newest printers that are out there where they're dumping a bucket full of fluid and then they cast it, in there. They're metal, now they're doing metal sintering,
Mhm.
which is
Exactly.
incredible. If you're working with anybody that's at that level, they're really into it and they're actually doing some pretty high tech stuff. But again, to
The
them, it's a
higher
device.
end manufacturers, especially in aerospace and in automotive, will be doing that because 3D printing for many people is prototyping, but for some industries is becoming good enough for low volume production.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
laser metal sintering. SLA is the difference between SLA and SLS is one is powder with a laser that
Mhm.
reforms the powder, and the other is an epoxy with a UV light that cures the epoxy into the shape as it pulls out of the goo.
Yeah. And all of them are problematic. And there are companies that actually sell them in the area and have really good service packages. It's a good opportunity for some partnerships and to get yourself in. That would be another good partner that I'd investigate.
Totally.
Who's selling the industrial 3D printing that's in the area. A lot of times they're also a SolidWorks reseller, and they're providing that vendor support as well. So another good one to partner with. The I would say another one too, as far as groups, when we're talking about different groups to partner with, um, manufacturing wise, go to the supply places. When you're looking, at people who are fabricators, if they're welding, who's supplying the gas? Who's supplying the torches and all those kind of things? I think is another good one to go after. Fabricators still need support. Now they're not going to be as technology reliant as what the chip, who are plunging and making chips and cutting materials, but structurally, they're still going to have, technology uses. They're still going to be using CAD programs. They're probably doing a lot of 3D scanning. That's the new big one, is that laser map and 3D scanning of the
Hmm.
environment before they start doing structural steel is another big one.
Sure.
Um,
So
so finding
let
out,
me tell a little story to add some flavor.
Mhm.
I in university I built race cars for 5 years. That was my
Cool.
previous life. I've lived
Okay.
many lives as a cat. I worked at a composites company and we were laying carbon. That was our thing. That they had a super hype. Like they were making parts for Bombardier, hashtag Canadian supplier.
Yeah.
We were making, and Eurocopter was another one. Like we were making
Yeah.
helicopter parts, but it was a very high tech operation because Bombardier had many quality assurance requirements that included ultrasonic scanning, 3D scanning, the little probe. Gosh, I can't remember this 15 years ago. I can't remember, but like you have to do 3D dot point collection to
Mhm.
say this part is in spec, and all of that material is documented digitally, and then has to be quality assured digitally, and then sent to Bombardier digitally, And this chain of evidence is part of their contract. They can't just deliver a bunch of carbon fiber parts for a plane by themselves. The evidence trail is equally as valuable, especially when you're doing aerospace, because those parts need to have their evidence trail when something happens.
Mhm.
And so, like, tracking that, making sure the employees can do it conveniently, ensures that it gets done, and then making sure the data exists no matter what bad stuff happens with the computers. Making sure that data still exists for the next 7 years is your responsibility to the manufacturer, because you're the tech company supporting them.
Yeah. I never knew a QC department that wouldn't skip a step if they were having technical challenges. Never happens. Never happens. Right. No, I think, and as far as who's your internal champion, who's utilizing technology, everybody always wants to start at the top of the chain. I got to talk to the president. Like, that would be the other thing, is you want to talk to the operations level. Who's going to value technology the most? Who's going to see it as an investment? Talk to whoever is their operations, whether it's director, coordinator, whatever. But operations is the level that you want to get in with them at. They're the ones that are going to value technology and see technology as an investment. That's who your target should be. If you're building lists, if you're looking for people online or LinkedIn or whatever it might be. I think also looking at, another one that I toss out a lot of times is Glassdoor. Get a good feeling for the company and stuff too. When I was still working at a local MSP, we had the opportunity to work with a local collision company. 17, 20 different locations. They probably had close to 300 employees, endpoints. It was going to be a huge deal for us, but they had more than 70 negative 1 star, if not worse. I think 1 star because you want to rate them, ratings on Glassdoor. So I'd say also do a little homework on some of these shops. Manufacturing and fabrication can have some unique individuals. Determine if you want to work with them. Do a little bit of vetting of them after you meet with them. See what kind of reputation they've got online. I think would be a bonus. I've definitely engaged with some challenging personalities when it comes to the manufacturing world. Everything affects their bottom line. And as an MSP, as an IT company, you're asking them to invest into technology where they're just probably seeing you as a cost center, right?
Right.
So check them out on Glassdoor. That's another good
Okay,
spot to be at.
let's riff on that, because as people will soon learn from our mind map, the
Mhm.
manufacturing industry has
Yeah,
many verticals. How did we organize it, Mike? I can't remember. The vertical, then industry, then
yeah,
niche. So the niche is the most specific. The niche would be like
yeah,
the composites manufacturers for aerospace
yes,
companies instead of
right.
composites manufacturers for automotive or something like that.
Mhm, mhm.
So which ones in your travels of life, which of the manufacturing, underneath the manufacturing industry, which niches have you heard are more empowered by technology? I'm trying to use the Brian Gillette like turn-ons
Mhm.
here, because I hate saying like which ones like technology, whatever. Which ones make good money by employing technology and know it? Because those are good clients. If they make
Mhm.
money with technology and they know they make money, they want to keep making money. So which ones are like that, and which have you heard don't?
Yeah, definitely. I'd rank aerospace at the top. Anybody working in composites, anybody working with 3D, printing of any kind, if they've got that listed as a capability, you should be checking them out on their website, right? And seeing what they offer, when you're talking to them and things. I think anybody that's up in that upper echelon, also supplying automotive. Automotive has a lot of requirements as well. If we're talking about people they're going to be affected by NIST and CMMC, which is, I get a lot of that, people that are trying to really move their way into that consultative and coaching, accountability coaching as people walk through that compliance area. Those are definitely going to be into the DoD. Anybody that's feeding into those. There are a lot of different levels, as far as DoD suppliers that are reporting into your Boeings and your Lockheeds and the rest of those are all going to see that technology as as really an investment in what they're doing, and also the data that has to be protected, that has to be stored in the right way, that has to have the right access controls. They're going to understand that that's an investment, and they don't want to have to do it. They want somebody to help them, manage that whole aspect of it. The ones that are not going to see it as much of an investment, you know, if they're just a welding shop, I don't want to say just, because I'm not a welder. I'm a gobber and a grinder. I can't call myself a welder. But I think
Got a
fabrication,
giant scar here from TIG welding aluminum in university.
yeah,
Woof.
I am not that. That
I've
is
blown
not my
through a fingernail with a welding rod before. That was not fun.
all new levels of pain you didn't know existed.
When you
Yeah.
start feeling it, oh gosh. Anyways,
Mhm.
yeah, welding shops.
They're going to
Yeah,
be on the lower end. You'll probably help them with their CAD. You'll probably help them, but they're not making chips. So aerospace chips, fabricators, if they use that term, they're a fabricator. They're making pipe racks for trucks. They're
hmm,
doing, some of those things. Then, I guarantee you they've got two forklifts that don't run, that they cannibalize for parts. A great thing that I used to do when I was selling machine tools is just drive by the parking lot and
yeah,
observe the exterior. What, how do they, is there a pile of scrap in the yard that they're hoarding, and, busted down, forklifts and things of that nature? Or is, wow, this place is clean.
right,
I could eat off the floor, so to speak. When you walk into the entryway, do they have a glass display case of the type of, things that they create and they build, like it's a showcase when you
yeah,
walk into the lobby? Those are the type of people that I want to work with. If the owner is answering the phone during the day and doesn't have a receptionist, and you can hear the machine noise in the background and the grinders, and probably not going to see technology as an investment. You want
right,
me to spend what on a computer? Right? Is the line you might hear. Whereas
right.
anybody that's doing those upper echelon parts and is working, and again, if you can find where they gather and you can work with some of those local, your MEP or your alliance, or this, where there's more of them that are in there, you know, they're obviously looking to grow. They're looking to connect with other like-minded manufacturers and share capabilities and those kind of things. Um,
Yeah,
I still think it goes back to that word of mouth and referral and reference too. Greatest failing of a salesperson is not asking for the sale. And if you're already working within the manufacturing industry and you want to target more of that, interview one of your clients and say, you know, who else in the industry do you think we could benefit by working together? Who are some folks that I should reach out? Would you be willing to make an introduction? Ask for the introduction to people that they know that are in the industry. Now, they're obviously not going to introduce you to their competitor, but you might get some of their other partners and things. Hey, are you a part of any associations? I'm really trying to grow within this network. Um, One of our greatest wins was supporting the Pacific Northwest Aerospace Alliance. They were our client for their IT. But then every month they would have a meeting, and there would be 70 other manufacturers in that room that all had questions about technology and how they were trying to implement technology in their business. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. So find
hmm,
those
hmm, hmm.
alliances and those companies first to really build upon, and it's going to take time. It's probably a little bit quicker path. I'm not one for the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce is, pay me $2,000 a year for a membership and you'll get to come have breakfast with everybody. But most of them are established business owners. They're not like entrepreneurs that are trying to grow in the same way and that's a key indicator that I'm looking for as an MSP, is a business that is growing and thriving and not stagnation. I'd much rather find, local organizations that have like-minded individuals so that I can be a part. You're going to have to be there a lot. You're going to have to put the time in. That's the other big part, trust, and
Yeah,
building that as a trusted advisor. is going to be a really big component. You got to, with that type of industry, you better walk the walk, talk the talk, and all those things all together at the same time. It's not easy. You won't pull the wool over their eyes, hoodwink them,
Right.
however you want to
But
phrase it.
that's the case with all of these niches that we're going to dive into, because
Sure.
it's not a mask that you put on to win more business. People will see through that.
Right.
When we say learn the lingo, we don't mean to pretend that you know. We
Hmm.
mean learn the lingo, because that's how they speak. And if you want to talk to them at their level, you got to learn their lingo and speak to them with their language. And
Right.
that earns you the ability to be their partner.
And I just put the leanfoundry.com or their lean canvas. We use a different version of this. But if you're trying to figure out how do I understand their business, these are the different kind of areas that you want to walk them through. You know, what are the current problems that they're facing in their industry? What are the, alternatives, the solutions, the key metrics that matter to them? Ask them what their unique value proposition is. What makes them different? Something that can't be bought, purchased, duplicated, replicated. Um, the channels one is a huge one. What channels are they in? So that's the real one that you want to know, is where are they at. But if you can, and this is a good page for it, but if you can develop what's known as this lean canvas about their industry, that will give you the insight to become the expert.
Fun thing that we're going to add to the mind map, our podcast. I think podcasts are a great way to learn more about the day-to-day life of each of these niches. You got any that from your manufacturing life? Like when you were in the water jet business, were podcasts a thing? You got any of that off the top of your head?
No, podcast is relatively new to me. I'm sure they're listening to them now. I don't know that there are any out there. I will say, I don't know what the number value would be these days, but I used to, when I was driving by parking lots, every car that was in the parking lot, you have to assume that owner's making 10 grand a month. Now, this is probably 15 years ago when I was doing that. So let's call it 20 grand a month. But when you consider the cost of employing one individual and insurance and keeping the lights on and making chips and gas for, welding and everything else, count those cars for how many employees are sitting in the parking lot. You
Mm-hmm.
get you an idea of what his revenue is at. You don't have to have a Zoom info to look up their reported revenue in those things. Just drop by and count the cars, how many employees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the biggest factor for MSPs, right? I want to work with companies that have, on average, what we hear is 10 people or more, which is funny to me because the Small Business Administration in the States says that over 80% of the businesses in the United States are 10 people or less. So when they
Right.
say that to me, they say I don't want to work with 80% of the market, but double
You and
edged.
I have both been into dozens of machine shops and laser welders and water jet cutters and grinders. Under 10 employees, I echo what you said earlier. When you get too small and the owner is working a machine, it's
Mhm.
probably not a good client for an MSP, because they're too manual. They're not using computers. I've
Yeah,
been in them personally, like Mike has said. Like, I'm thinking about my laser welder that I used to work with. The owner was working a machine. He doesn't care. He didn't care about computers. He didn't care.
yeah,
Like, you could email him. He never checked. So there's a good litmus test.
yeah,
He's not spending money for managed services.
yeah.
Water
I
jet
would
cutter
say
was charging me with his Stripe thing on his phone. Like, that's how he transacted money. He does
go
not
find
paying
the
for
metal
managed services.
supplier instead. Who's feeding that guy the materials that he's cutting up and he's welding together? Go work with the metal supplier in town. He's got racks and racks of material. He's probably got millions of dollars just in inventory alone. And he's
Hmm.
probably got an inventory management system that he needs help with too. So, who's feeding those raw materials as well? Where are they getting their raw materials from in the area? Who's their supplier for those kind of things? Tap them as well. Anybody that's associated there, I think would be another good one.
Right. Inventory management. Would you call it ERP in this industry? Enterprise resource
Mm,
management?
probably. Yeah.
Okay.
It's becoming a lot more prevalent. I think folks are really starting to rely on that. That which is measured improves, and they need to see that data. They need to see those metrics, right? They want those dashboards. If they're not, and you can provide expertise in ERP, it's another my favorite joke. What's the definition of a TLA? Just ask any IT guy what a TLA is, and they're going to rack their brains. It's
I
a
don't know what
three-letter
that is.
acronym. Yeah, it's a three-letter acronym,
Oh, okay.
right? It's a great joke. Break the
Yeah.
ice every time because there's
Yeah.
so many acronyms out
That's
there.
right.
ERP, what does that mean? So that's why I usually say inventory management,
Right.
but there's so many other levels to it now beyond just inventory. What's going in, what's going out, all the other things that a true ERP, and if you can provide guidance on that, when we talk about differentiators between you and the other people that are like, oh yeah, we got firewalls, we got switches, we
They
got
don't care about that.
yeah, right. But you tell them, what I'd really like to do is help you with your operational efficiency, right, and your profitability. You say profitability because they're working on narrow margins on a lot of this stuff. How do you make them more profitable through technology? You know, um, our CAD system that we used to sell, as far as the nesting portion to nest all the little parts into the sheet goods, would allow you to save the remnant file of what had been cut. So now I know how many square inches or centimeters for those of you in the rest of the world that use a real measurement system. Um, how many is left in that sheet? And I even have a DXF, a drawing exchange file of that sheet that's left. 3D scanning tables to put those on, and like there are all kinds of things that you could bring technology to bear. The more
Right.
that you know about their industry, and I'm sure this goes for any of the other ones that we can delve into, but any area where you can help them squeak a couple extra pennies, what do you guys do with your scrap? Who are you
Right.
selling your chips to locally? These guys are literally filling their parking lots with scrap materials so that they can take them to the local scrap yard on the right day when the price of stainless or the price of whatever is higher. Margins are thin, and if you can help them with that efficiency and profitability, and that goes in line with you know are you a technology provider or are you a business partner? And I'm here to help you grow your business. I'm a business owner. You're a business owner. I want to help you grow your business through technology is a lot different than, oh, we provide technology solutions. And I bet they're white glove, bespoke, and proactive too. Those are my new least favorite words. Used to be synergy and digital transformation, but those are the other ones that are creeping up the ladder. So
Hmm. This is the perfect point to end on because you're helping them with their business objectives. Is what's the difference between selling a commodity and
right.
being in a relationship that makes you high margin? Because they can buy Microsoft licenses from Microsoft, and they already do. So what are you going to bring to the table that makes them more money? And if you
Mhm.
can show that to them in their language, which is like the lingo, and with the tools they already use and the tools they know of from their industry, then that's what differentiates you from them just going to Microsoft and buying licenses.
Yeah, drop an F bomb. It'll probably help. Yeah. I
This
mean,
might be the like that's the vernacular. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not being facetious. I've worked in the shops before. Like I used to have dirt under my fingernails. Now I worked at a like my mom used to tease me and she would buy me like hand soap, like the orange hand soap to wash my hands because in university
Ooh,
my hands
no,
are
no,
covered
no.
in grease.
Gojo cherry bomb. Far
Oh
superior.
yeah. You buying from McMaster Car in the States? Like McMaster Car was years for me. I can't tell you how many of those yellow catalogs that I've had.
Yeah, my only degree is in motorcycle technology. Okay, so I went from being a motorcycle guy to fell backwards into flow water jets because the dean of the motorcycle program where I was going for VROD stuff when the VROD was released asked, do you have anybody that can take something apart and put it back together without instructions or a schematic? Yeah, we got this one kid. So that's how I fell into 10 years of water jet. So anybody that knows water jet blue goop, is it's kind of like anti-seize. If you know the dangers of being the Tin Man and anti-seize, and how that silver stuff goes everywhere. In the water jet industry, blue goop is what's used on the fittings. It's anti-seize, anti-gall, because it's
Okay.
stainless steel fittings under 94,000 psi, right? Um, telling you, Gojo Cherry Bomb is the go-to.
Hey, that's a good gift. So, like, instead of just
Yeah,
giving branded swag, you bring a case of that over. That's how you win friends.
I should have had it up here. I still have some downstairs that's in the toolbox, right in my Snap-on. But that would be
Buy
a
some of the
great one.
toolbox, they'd be your friend. That's for sure.
Some Snap-on tools and getting to know your local Snap-on dealer and your local Matco dealer
Mm-hmm.
who's driving the truck around.
That's right. That's a life. Like, for everyone listening, thinking about manufacturers, that's part of the life. The coffee truck style Snap-on or Mac Tools truck. Are they independent operators, or are they centrally owned? Okay, independent operators. So, like, the
Mhm.
Snap-on's truck. This is an independent operator. They pay for the truck. I don't know if it's franchise or whatever. They drive around and they'll sell because, like, the mechanics shop or the fab shop will need that wrench, and they want it. That's the just in time delivery. Every afternoon, the truck comes by at the same time and they play their like horn, and that's how you know to run out.
It's always about relationships and who you know. Some of the top performers as far as my referral partners were the ones that were doing commercial real estate, my internet service providers. But my number one was my local office furniture guy who was doing cubicles and seats, chairs. People aren't buying the chair, they're leasing the chair from the office furniture company. And if they're leasing more than 10 cubes or 10 chairs and setting up a new office for somebody, he would drop my card, ask them what they were doing for IT, and got great referrals from them. So I would definitely, if you're going to be working in the machine tool industry, and automotive has become another big one. That's like a whole another one we can talk about. The automotive industry and some of the new guidelines that they have coming down the pipe for their data as well, because they have a lot of data. They got social security numbers and loans and all those things too.
Talk about
At a
dealerships.
couple of yeah, at a couple of
Yeah,
dealerships that were really, really dealerships need technology. That's a whole nother
that'll be
one.
a whole nother. That'll be a
Yeah,
whole nother episode we can do, because that's a whole niche on it. That's a whole vertical, and then
yeah,
there's niches under that by itself. Automotive
yeah.
retail.
Those the
Yeah.
Matco and Snap-on are your two biggest ones out there. I probably would drive by the local McMaster or Mastercar or Granger here in the States. You got
Yep.
a local Granger office? Go get to know the local Granger guy. Or I'm trying to think of the hardware supplier that we have in the area that does all the nuts and bolts of every size standalone.
Fastenal.
Yeah,
In Canada, we got Fastenal,
Fastenal.
and that's a bunch of DeFasco's a
Here I
big
got
name, but
locally Tacoma Screw is the big one, but Fastenal guys, they actually have regional reps as well. Take that guy to lunch. He's already got all the biggest ones mapped out and can make
mhm,
some introductions to you. Get a spiff
and have the
program.
referral commission ready.
Yeah, spiff. You get money up front, and if I close them in 180 days, I'll give you a certain percentage of the onboarding.
There you go.
Money talks.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we just capped off a little masterclass. This is part of our mini series on the riches and the niches. Everyone's telling you that you should, so you probably know the why, but we're going to tell you how. And in this mini series, we broke down how to get in to the manufacturing industry, and then a few niches inside, how to talk the talk, walk the walk, where to find them, where to find the watering holes, the line of business applications, what they look like, who's good and who's not good, and where the sweet spot starts when you're talking about manufacturing companies.
And I got one more that I'll put in here because I pulled it open and I think it's important. If you're going to start working in the CMMC and you want to help with that NIST compliance work, there are a lot of tools that are out there that claim to make it easy. I would personally recommend no paid endorsement, but futurefeed.co. Um, you have questions on it, I can introduce you to my old COO, CTO, who uses it. as a part of his process. But if you want a step-by-step tool to complete that compliance requirements, Future Feed, probably the
We should
best
have
one.
put your referral link in this.
They should.
Where's your affiliate link?
Yeah, they were
The
good
world
enough.
lives on affiliate referrals.
Yeah. Now, you want affiliate referral, my Fathom recording tool or seamless.ai. Sure, I got one of those. That's a whole
I
nother
use Fathom
ball.
too.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right, Mike. This has been our mini series on the riches and the niches. Thanks for being the inaugural founding member. And you are also the first person I've shown the mind map to. So you are the founding member of the Riches and the Niches mind map, which by the time this show comes out will be a little bit decluttered, because right now it's kind of cluttered, but that's kind of the challenge that we have, is mapping out all these niches in a because there's thousands, and we got to try and quiet down a little bit of the noise. But that way, for any MSPs listening that have clients in different verticals and different niches, we're trying to help you identify them, describe them, and then expand your understanding of them, so you can find the watering holes and know the lingo, find the centers of influence and the line of business applications they use, so you can double down, because the value is the better you know their problems, the better that you can solve them, and that makes you more money. All right.
And make sure that you're checking their cyber score.
There we go. Now you're throwing back the product placement here. All right, Mike. Mike Fielstra from Tech Pro Marketing. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Cyber Confidential. Great to have you.
Enjoyed this episode? Hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe.